everybody. Thank you for tuning in to MudPie Podcast. I'm Ryan.
I'm Jesse.
And we are speaking with Valerie. Valerie, how do you say your last name?
Lofaso.
Lofaso. Go ahead, please. Explain what you do and who you are.
Well, hi, guys. Thanks for having me. Like I said, my name is Valerie Lofaso. I consider myself a writer first, but I am also an empathic medium, paranormal investigator, and I'm also a Reiki Master teacher. I learned I was an empath probably 15 years ago, even though I have been one my entire life. I just didn't know what was happening to me. So the last 15 years has been an exploration and trying to figure out intuition and how it relates to paranormal, ufology, and all these weird things that happen in our world.
Very cool. And how did this start for you? Like, where did you first gain the inspiration to do what you're doing?
It's hard to really pinpoint where I started. I think it all does come back to writing my books. I started writing the Tangled Web of Friends series that I have 3 books in the series currently published. And when I first got rejected by a publisher, they said I needed more bite. So in order to get more meat for the story, I decided I needed hands-on experience in ghost stories. I needed to live the experiences. So I joined a paranormal investigative and research group. And it's one of those things where once you go down one rabbit hole, you find out there's 1,000 more rabbit holes down there, and each one of those has 1,000 more rabbit holes. So that's probably how it started for me.
Awesome. So I know we were talking, Ryan and I had a question about exactly what is an empathic medium, and is there a difference between like empathic medium and when you just hear the term like medium for describing someone's like, I don't know if you would use like psychic abilities or anything like that, but what the difference is there?
Yeah. So an empath is any person who can feel the energy of things in our world. So it can be living people, dead people, animals, land, food, pretty much anything that has energy. An empath has the ability to pick up on that energy. As an empathic medium, I call myself that because mediums, the term medium refers to a person who can communicate with the dead. And I have learned how to basically figure out what energy is communicating with me. And a lot of times it is people that we believe once lived a human existence and are now passed on. So that's why I call myself an empathic medium.
And what does that communication look like? Or how do you figure out that you're talking with or having this experience with something?
It really depends on the spirit. Sometimes they come through very clearly, very quickly. It can be very unmistakable that, okay, I have somebody presenting themselves, in a human-like form and they want to talk to me. Other times I'll just start to get feelings. I'll get an uncomfortable feeling usually at first. It often starts in my stomach. And I have to then ask a lot of questions to bring in visuals and other feelings to help me kind of translate what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Is that ever scary?
I mean, yeah, it can be unnerving, but I really try. I've learned how to trust my spirit guides to help me discern when I'm in a situation where maybe I need to be cautious. I try not to lead with fear because fear is manipulation and I don't want to be manipulated.
Yeah.
Sure.
Was there a point, do you have control over when you are establishing communication? Does sometimes it ever happen without your intention, something reaching out to try to communicate to you, or do you always have to be the one that starts it?
No, I have to be very careful. It can happen in my own home. I have my home energetically locked down, but things can still come through if necessary, if they really need help. But I can get approached, when I'm driving down the road, I can pick up on energy. I drive through a weird area and I'm getting information. I was, out for a drive down in Massachusetts a couple weeks ago and was approached by a dead person that had been murdered. That doesn't happen all that often, but it has been happening a lot more lately.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because I've been, with everything going on in the world, I've been spending a lot more time at home. And so as an empath, going out in the world means I'm exposing myself to energy, and I'm responsible for how I manage that energy. So if I'm not feeling 100% and I go out into a crowded situation, that's going to drain me. So I've been spending a lot of time just filling myself up with positive energy and not getting as drained as I was, if I just had to go to work every day, sit in an office with coworkers who I like, but, it can be a draining situation to be in an office environment, for 8 hours. So I think the fact that I've kind of been hibernating and I've been doing a lot of meditation and I've been working on myself constantly through this time because I don't have a whole lot else to do.
Yeah.
I think that has kind of amped up everything for me.
Oh,
Yeah, that balance between being an empath and kind of taking care of yourself, I know that can probably be exhausting at times. Do you do anything special to kind of, I don't know, keep that balance?
Yeah, meditation is one of the things that is very helpful for me. That helps to raise my vibration. Honestly, singing in the car helps me a lot. Music raises vibration, and I love to sing. I'm not great at it, but it brings me joy. So anything that brings joy is helpful for keeping the energy up. Trying to eat as healthy as possible, getting out in nature.
How often do you come across, like, how often are you approached, would you say, compared to like if you were seeking out communication?
That's hard to answer because, I might leave my house once a week right now. So
Yeah.
I don't get approached in my home very often. I have a daughter, so I'm very careful about what can come into my home. But it is fairly often that, I encounter some form of energy when I leave the house, almost every single time.
I know you'd mentioned spirit guides, and I had a conversation before with people about spirit guides, and I'm very interested in that concept. How did you find your spirit guides, or actually, I guess, how would you define like your spirit guides?
So I define them as any spiritual entity that is with us for our highest good. They are there to guide us on our path through this life. They are not here to hold our hand through everything that we do, but they are here to kind of help steer us in the right direction. And they can be with us for big things, and they can be with us for, occasional small things. It really, it can vary. And I've found mine through a couple different ways. Again, meditation, journey work is a type of meditation, a shamanic journey work. Usually is an intention to reach a spirit guide. I've worked with other mediums who are very talented at picking up on people's spirit guides. And, just exploration on my own.
Have you ever picked up on somebody else's spirit guides? I've never heard of that before. So
yeah, and I actually do a lot of times. I don't do a lot of readings for people, but when I do, oftentimes spirit guides will come through.
Oh, wow.
Gotcha.
Man, that's so cool. So when you're talking about spirit guides, might be an off-the-wall question, but so do you think that there's
no such thing in my world?
Okay, perfect. So you're saying they try to help you be your higher version of yourself, or come from the side of like the best part of you. Is there this thing that you're supposed to be? Is there some kind of like path that you're supposed to be walking that these guys are guiding you down, or are they just adjusting based on your current situation?
So the thought that resonates most strongly for me, that I know other people in the spiritual community believe as well, is that there are certain things in our lives that we are absolutely meant to experience, but there's multiple ways that we can get to those different points. So if you imagine like, you know, a game board, like the game of life, you know, you have all these different landmarks on it, but there are a couple different pathways to get to them sometimes. So, you know, we have free will. We have the ability to choose to go left or right, you know, but ultimately we are going to end up where we need to be, and they are helping us to get there. And a lot of times, you know, people say, oh, well, I'm going through a really hard time, so my spirit guides must not be helping me. But I think what we forget is that we make the biggest changes in our lives when something bad happens, when tragedy hits. You know, you think about, you know, you get laid off and suddenly you're like, okay, I have this time to reevaluate, what do I want to do with my life? And next thing you know, you're finding yourself in a completely new career that you love. You know, bad things might be bad in the moment, but we have to remember that we can't see the big picture. And the big picture is always to get us to a good place.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Now, as far as communicating with, we're going to say, you know, deceased people or people that have existed before, what do you think that dimension is that they're able to communicate with you? Like, do you think it's an afterlife, or do you think we live in like multiple dimensions and it's just they're in a different, you see what I'm saying?
I do. And that's a great question. And that's one I don't have an answer for, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. You know, we hear a lot more and more lately about the multiverse theory, and it does resonate with me. You know, I've had experiences where I'm driving down a highway and there are no exits, and there's a car that I just drove past and it's in the right-hand lane, and next thing I know, it's gone. There's nowhere for it to go. You know, I've had a lot of experiences like that, and it seems like, you know, they must have crossed into another dimension. I don't know how else to put it. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that some paranormal experiences are people from other dimensions trying to communicate with us or accidentally coming through. But at the same time, there is a lot of evidence that, you know, when I'm speaking with somebody's deceased uncle, and I've never met the person sitting in front of me, and I've never met their deceased uncle, how am I able to get information on this person that once lived? You know, maybe they're coming from another dimension, but maybe they're not. You know, there's so much we just don't know yet. And that's actually one of my current focuses is, you know, I want to find ways to ask those questions, you know, find spirits that are willing to help work with me. And I don't know if that's possible, but I'm hoping it is.
Now, do you think that, is there like a tactile relationship between those two dimensions? Well, we can just say dimensions for now, but can they be physical in our reality from the other side, or from that reality?
I don't know. I think it's possible, but I think it's challenging. And I think the possibility of other types of entities being able to cross through and be physical is a real possibility. You know, and for example, Bigfoot. You know, I personally believe Bigfoot is a highly intelligent, multidimensional entity.
We actually, our first podcast was with a person who does research into Bigfoot, but from like a biology perspective. And we talked for a long time about that. A lot of people are from the camp that it's like an interdimensional thing, or a multidimensional being able to come and go like as it pleases. And I think that's kind of what it is too. I feel like there could possibly be something around us that we just aren't able to perceive, you know, just like we can't see UV light or whatever, you know, that we just haven't evolved to a point of being able to view it directly, but it might be able to affect something that we can view directly. And I don't know how real videos of like kitchen objects flying through the air or whatever, you know, like any paranormal videos like that or true, but like that could possibly be the thing, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. How do we know what we're looking at if we don't know what we're looking at?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense. There's a story of, and it may have been Columbus. I wish I knew for sure, but of Native Americans watching people come on shore from a boat, but they can't see the boat because they've never seen a boat that big before. They've never seen one of those, big ships with the mast. So they can't see the boat. They just see these people because they know what people look like.
Yeah.
I had an experience, a group of us were kind of doing a fun, Bigfoot hunt. And it was purely a lark and for fun. We were not being serious about it at all. And I think every bad story starts that way. We weren't overly serious about it. But what we did was we hiked up a mountain in New Hampshire, upstate New Hampshire, where there was a cabin, and we stayed in the cabin for the night. And we brought with us, one of the guys brought one of those Bluetooth speakers, and he had on his phone supposed recordings of Bigfoot calls. And so we're sitting on top of this mountain in pitch black, and he's playing these calls, and the air just shifted. We all became really, really uncomfortable. Nobody said anything for a good while. We just listened to these Bigfoot calls rotate through the speaker. And there was one call that was really, really disturbing. It sounded like, to me, it felt like a mother searching for her lost child. It was just excruciating to listen to. So we're sitting there, we're all getting really uncomfortable. And finally, one of the guys says, does anybody else feel like something's watching us? And we all kind of went, yes. We all went, okay, let's get inside. Like we felt like we were being watched by something not necessarily out to hurt us, but very intense. I was the only one in the group. There were 4 of us that was actively using my intuition. So as we sat inside this cabin, thinking, that the walls of the cabin would do any good, I think that was more of a trick of our minds to make us feel better than anything else. But I was trying to reach out intuitively and say, okay, what are we feeling? And it wasn't necessarily Bigfoot, but I don't know what it was because it was something I'd never encountered before. So I couldn't see it because I didn't know what I was looking at. I could only feel it. Yeah.
I heard that too about language kind of works the same way. And I have a degree in art. And one thing, an interesting painting thing that I learned was that the color blue, for instance, people didn't know what it was until they could put a name to it. So they couldn't recognize the sky was blue until they recognized the sky was blue and actually had a term for what it was that they were able to see. And I think that might be the same way with stuff like this, is if it's so just like never before known, like UFOs and things like that, like, yeah, we don't know how to describe it. Who knows if that's what we're seeing or not? We just have no way to like perceive it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the human challenge, of being stuck in these bodies. We are limited. We're not as limited as we think we are, but we are definitely limited.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more to people, but with like mainstream society, there's no way to, it's so hard for people to explore those ideas or those feelings, especially for like young children that might be more aware of if there's abilities and things, might be more aware of that, but they're so like talked down upon, or it's just viewed as so fringe to have those types of like feelings or thoughts that it's like no one can.
Absolutely. I experienced that my whole life. I was just told I was too sensitive, and the majority of empaths that you encounter, if you say, were you told growing up that you were too sensitive? They go, oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was the phrase, was I'm too sensitive. It was just dismissed. I would pick up on things. I would know things, but nobody took me seriously because nobody knew what it was. My parents didn't know what an empath was. I'm pretty sure my dad was an empath, but he passed away 22 years ago. And I didn't know what this was, you know, when he was alive. So I never was able to really talk to him about it, except in death.
Yeah. Now, since you're really like tuned in or sensitive to energy, and are there good and bad energies? Like, is there an evil and a non-evil, or are there just different ways that we perceive a thing?
I don't believe in evil in the traditional religious sense of, you know, the devil is out to get you or that type of thing. I think everything has a purpose, including evil. Like I was saying before, you know, bad stuff sometimes needs to happen to get us to where we need to go. Because if it's too easy, or if it's handed to us on a silver platter, we're not going to appreciate it the same way as we are if we've gone through hell to get there. You know, I guess that's kind of a pun, going through hell. You know, it to me, it seems like, you know, if you go through those bad things, if you encounter these bad things, there's a reason for it. And that's hard to accept sometimes. You know, I always use the horrible example of my daughter, who in second grade lost a classmate to cancer, and watching a 9-year-old wither away from cancer, that's horrific. And you think about the family and, you know, the kids who don't understand this type of thing yet. But, you know, what my daughter and I talked about was, you know, just imagine the impact that her life could have on somebody, and we just can't see it yet. One of her classmates could go on to become an oncologist and find a cure for this extremely rare form of cancer that this kid had. You know, there's ripple effects to everything. And, you know, again, you know, like we can't see that big game board that our spirit guides can see. We just have to have faith that it's there. And that's really challenging for us.
Yeah. Now, I had heard, I was listening to one of the interviews with someone else, and you were talking about you have a connection to animals too, right? You can like, can you go into a little bit more detail about that? I was pretty interested in what you were talking about.
Animal world is very spiritual. Animals are constantly bringing us spiritual messages. And I'm talking about real physical animals. They do come through in spirit form as well. But the animal kingdom is very connected to the earth, and they're very connected to the spirit world. So, and they don't have the human muck that we have. So it makes them very easy for us to connect with them, because they're not as high vibrational as like a spirit guide would be. So that makes it easier to connect with. But we do have animals in spirit form that come through as well.
What do you mean by that? Like, are you talking about like kind of like a spirit animal, like for each, like a certain animal is connected to a certain person, or just like any animal?
Both. You know, we do have animal spirit guides. I have a raven and several cats. But everybody has at least one animal guide with them. If you think about an animal that you have been drawn to your entire life, that's probably one of your animal guides. An animal that consistently comes up in your life in weird ways, that's going to be potentially a spirit guide, but it could just be a message. But, you know, I had a friend who had to put her very sick German Shepherd down, and she asked another friend and myself to go along with her to the vet when she was putting him down, because we both do Reiki, and she asked us to do Reiki on the dog to help make the transition easier for him. And so, you know, of course we went with her, and we're all crying through the whole thing, so it was just so awful to watch this. But as soon as the dog passed on, he came right back into the room as happy as could be, super excited. And he's like, I'm here and I'm going to be watching out for you and protecting you, you know, meaning the owner that he just left. So in spirit form, he still had this connection to her and wanted to keep doing his job of protecting her. So that was a really cool moment to see.
Wow.
Oh, so do you think animals are sentient in the way that humans are? Are they able to are they on that same plane as the human consciousness?
I think they have the ability to see things that we can't see and do things that we can't do. I used to have a cat that I swear to God, he would teleport around the house. I know cats are fast, but I mean, he would be in one room and you turn around and he's right behind you,
Yeah.
and it's like a blink of an eye, but I definitely think there's a higher consciousness there.
No.
And humans can connect with them telepathically if they're open to it.
Man, that'd be cool. I wish I could do that with my dogs. So
You
bad.
probably do, and you just don't even realize you're doing it.
Yes, that's probably true. I do know the way that my dog communicates. She can look at me and I just know exactly what she's thinking, like right in the moment.
Yeah, well, that's connecting intuitively with your dog.
That's awesome. Okay. Now, on this paranormal stuff, going back to the interaction, the possible interaction between that dimension and the reality that we live in, is there any substance to like paranormal possession stories or things like that?
I believe there is. I have a friend whose daughter was, I don't know if it was a full possession, but she was pretty sick for a while, and another medium that I know was able to remove the entity from her, and she, has been able to live a very normal life. And she's a very lovely person, but she, it was a bad thing happened, and a ghost took advantage of the moment. So I definitely believe it exists. I've participated in an exorcism of sorts with several other mediums for a girl who she was a little different. She was very curious and liked the cool factor of the dark side of things, and decided that she wanted to take another soul into her body, and did that. Not sure how she did it, but she did it, and it made her very, very sick. Physically, she was very sick. She wasn't eating. She lost a ton of weight, and she was just not well. And I think 4 or 5 of us participated in helping to remove the entity from her. And it was really sad, because we didn't understand what was going on at first. We didn't realize she had taken the soul in instead of the other way around. But there was just the slightest difference when she talked and when the ghost inside of her talked. And one of them kept saying, "I just want to go home." And at first we thought it was just her. And then we realized, oh, wait, no, that's not her. It was the soul that she had taken into her. He just wanted to go home.
Yeah.
And she had, she was keeping him in there.
Wow.
What an intense situation that probably was.
Yeah, it was
for that person.
It was probably the most bizarre thing I've ever dealt with, paranormally speaking.
Now, do you go out and you say you do paranormal research? Where do you focus, and what is it that you seek out when you're doing your paranormal research?
I'm part of an investigation team. So we try to focus mostly on homes or businesses, more so than going to the pop culture places or all the places that you see on TV all the time. Those places are great. And I would love to go to a lot of them, but our focus is on people who really need to be helped. When I first started working with the investigation team, I was just an investigator. I knew I was an empath, and I knew that I had some sort of intuition going on, but I didn't know what that was, and it wasn't developed to the point it is now. And I really liked the fact that the team that I work with always has a medium go along to the investigations. And we tell the homeowner or business owner, if we are allowed by the spirit world, we will clear this place. There's none of that, oh, but it's a nice ghost, we don't mind it here. Like, no, it needs to be moved on. If the spirit world allows it, we will move it on.
Yeah.
You know, it's somebody's brother, sister, mother, you know, they don't deserve to be stuck being entertainment for somebody or being somebody's cool story.
So are they trapped in the environment that they're, like, if you guys go to a person's house, they're trapped inside of that house, they can't leave?
Generally, yeah. And they're trapped only by their own beliefs. You know, if they believe that they can't leave the property, then they can't leave the property. You know, it's
like an
very,
intention thing.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, you know, they have this system structure that they learned in life that they still have with them in death, because they haven't, what we called, crossed over to that place where like spirit guides would be, where they have the big picture. They're still hanging on to the human beliefs.
Yeah. Are you able to do investigative stuff like online, like through, instead of having to go to people's houses? I know that this year has been so weird with everything, but are you able to still have like that relationship with that location if you're not physically present, or do you need to be present there?
I prefer to be present, but I don't have to be. I can certainly do things by phone or online, you know, through a video chat, because it's all energy. You know, if I can get enough focus, you know, to feel the energy of the location, it doesn't matter where I am.
So what do you feel about, are you able to feel energy beyond just one individual person? Can you feel like, if we were like, okay, what kind of vibe is the current state of our country? Like, are you able to, I know that's a huge, but can you like tap into something like that? Or is it more a personal thing, like a one-on-one? Or
I definitely get the collective conscious energy of the world, you know, early in 2020, when, you know, things hit the fan, it was really hard for me. There was so much collective fear and uncertainty that I was being crushed for a while. You know, I couldn't function. I did the bare minimum. I worked my job. I fed myself and my kid, and I couldn't do much more than that. You know, I just didn't have the energy to do the things that I love to do, until things started to kind of normalize, and I started to get back into meditation and retake back responsibility for the energy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, I can, you know, and a couple of years ago, I was having lunch with a good friend who's also very intuitive. And we were talking about, you know, just the weird energy that we were feeling at that time. And she's like, well, what do you think about it? And I'm like, all I know is, if the earth were a dog, she's getting ready to shake us off like a bunch of fleas. And
cool.
You know, so to have everything that's happened recently, I'm kind of going, is that what I was feeling?
Oh man, this will be the second podcast this week where someone talks about an impending doom happening soon.
You know, yes and no. I mean, we need to wake up.
Yeah.
We need to wake up. We need to have more empathy. You know, that's one of my missions, is to spread empathy. Because if everybody on the planet could put themselves into another person's shoes before they make any act against them, the world would be a better place.
Oh yeah.
But we don't teach empathy. We actually teach the opposite of it, thanks to reality TV and social media and all that good stuff. You know, we're not teaching it, but we're encouraging selfishness and,
well, I mean, our society is built on it. You can't be a capitalist billionaire if you actually feel for the people that you're making your billions of dollars off of.
That's true.
Like,
there needs to be more balance. You know, I don't think the world as we know it needs to go away, but I think there definitely needs to be more balance. You know, there needs to, there's a shift happening. It's been coming for a while, and it's going to continue. But I personally believe we're on a positive upswing. And I know it doesn't feel that way for a lot of people. You know, but we've been given the opportunity right now to say, okay, the old way either wasn't working or I just can't do it that way. So let's find another way. There's none of this, you know, don't let it defeat you. Just say, okay, what's another way to do this? And find another way. There's always another way.
Yeah. Now, are you able to like turn off or separate from like picking up on those energies? Or so you were saying that like you can feel when things are in a decline in the country, you could feel like the weight and pressure of all that. But what if something really bad was to happen, some kind of cataclysm or natural disaster in your area? Would you be able to shut that down and like kind of ignore that so that you can focus on whatever getting to safety or anything? Or is it something that like really can take a hold of you?
I think it really depends on whatever that catastrophic incident is, how much it needs to affect my life and where I actually am energetically. If I'm in a really good place, you know, I don't get as drained by things going on. But if I need to experience that, then I'm going to experience it no matter what I do. There's really no turning it off. It's just managing the energy.
Yeah. Now, oh, good.
No, go ahead, please. Finish.
So you were talking about empathy, and I agree that I think everybody needs to have a lot more empathy. It would definitely help. I spent a long time in the Army, and I think that we would do things like not go to war if we could have a little bit more empathy.
Yeah,
But and that's one of the reasons why I got out. But I find that things like psilocybin mushrooms, for instance, and stories of like ayahuasca and DMT, these like psychedelic drugs that get people having those same feelings of empathy and more like empathy towards everybody, and these ideas of being able to maybe pick up on or feeling like there is this force outside of the normal reality that we can perceive. Do you have any experience with psychedelics in that realm, or do you know, is there like a relationship between people taking psychedelics in the brain space they're in there versus also being able to maybe communicate or have this like medium type of skill?
I haven't personally had any experience with it, but I have, you know, read a lot and I know people who've gone through it. And, you know, I think it's like any other tool out there. If you're ready for it, it'll work for you. If you're not ready for it, or if you just shouldn't do it and you're forcing it, you're not going to have a good experience. You know, I've heard of people with the ayahuasca stuff. Just they're so desperate for an experience that they rush into it, and then they don't have a good experience and they don't understand why. Well, they weren't in the right space for it. You know, but I think it has a place. I don't feel drawn to doing it, but I think if that's something that somebody feels strongly about and they feel drawn to it, I know some people that have had amazing life-changing experiences, and I don't think it's generally a type of thing where you have to keep taking it to have the intuitive experiences. I think it just brings you to that next level so you can continue having the experiences and continue to grow in that way.
Yeah. Now, for someone trying to learn how to tap into these energies, or maybe just trying to start out trying to connect with this stuff, are there things that they should watch out for? Like, are there dangers in connecting with this other dimension?
There definitely does seem to be. One of my favorite analogies was given to me by my friend Andy Kitt, who's the head of our investigative team. And he compares doing all of this, you know, ghost hunting and paranormal exploration, you know, whether it's using tarot cards or doing an EVP session. It's like being in the middle of Manhattan, opening up your window and saying, hey, who wants to talk to me? You don't know who's going to respond. You know, chances are the crazy person is going to respond. The normal person is going to be like, who's that crazy person yelling out the window? So you do have to be careful if you don't know what you're doing. You know, I used to do seances, and I didn't like doing seances, but one of the things that I found really interesting, we would, you know, use different tools to try to get communication to come through, including a Ouija board. And one of the times there was a woman at the table who was so petrified of using a Ouija board that nothing was happening because her fear was bigger than everything else. So it shut down any possibility of anything communicating with us, even though I kept reassuring her that I'm monitoring the room. I'm keeping an eye on things. I'm not going to let anything come through that isn't supposed to be here. Didn't matter. She was just too afraid of it. You know, and those fears have a place. We have to be careful when we're reaching out to the unknown, because like we were saying, we can't see it, you know, and even if we do see it, we don't exactly trust what we're seeing sometimes. You know, how do we know we're really getting what we think we're getting?
Are there things that are more connected to darker sides of stuff, like this woman that had this unreasonable fear of this Ouija board? I mean, there's a reason she has that fear, and it's because there's a story that's been going around Ouija boards since the Ouija boards came out about its connection to like darker forces and stuff. Now, is that true? Do you think it's connected to darker forces in general, or are there objects out there that tend to be more connected to darker energies?
I think anything has the possibility. I think you can get something bad coming through during an EVP session, doing tarot cards, doing, you know, any of this stuff. There's always that possibility. I know people that got an attachment walking through a cemetery. You know, they were just walking around. They weren't doing anything. You know, there's always the possibility. So being cautious and getting to know your spirit guides and having a good relationship with them really helps with these situations, because they can be there to make sure that you're connecting in the right ways.
Do you use the same spirit guide every time?
Right now, I have two particular guides that are with me to do my work with other entities.
And do they function, like, do they have different roles?
Yeah, I mean, these two are with me to specifically help me intuitively to reach out to whatever ghosts and other energies. I mentioned I have a raven. The raven is with me for my writing. And I've had others with me to help with relationships, and other jobs. It can change. You generally have one guide that's with you through your whole life, and then others that will come and go during various stages.
Gotcha.
What's the most impactful experience that you've had in the paranormal realm?
That's a really tough question. Because, you know, there's been a lot, but really, you know, I think making the decision to join the paranormal group was life-changing for me. You know, that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but it didn't just open me to all kinds of experiences, because at the time it was only ghosts for me. And then joining this group, we opened a center for consciousness studies where we had lectures and classes and support groups and all of this stuff. And through hearing other people's stories, I learned that I had an ET encounter when I was 4. I remembered bits and pieces of it, but didn't recognize it for what it was until I started hearing other people telling their stories. And I went, hey, that sounds like that thing that happened to me. And then all these other pieces started to fall into place. And it's not just about what I learned either, but the people that I have met through doing this work are some of the best people. They are my heart family, I call them. They're not my blood family, they're my heart family. And I'm forever grateful. It completely changed my life.
That's awesome. Your ET experience, do you think that, because I did want to ask you about ufology and like how you, like what your role is and all that, but do you think ETs are like another planet, extraterrestrials from another place, or do you think they're also in this realm of this like paranormal realm, Bigfoot realm, all those, that like dimension?
It seems to me like there is something very physical happening with ETs, but my experiences, to me, they all seem to be able to cross boundaries that we don't know about. You know, some of them are very physical still, but not in the same way that we are.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. It's
Do you
kind of
ever
interesting.
Do you ever make contact with ETs like recently?
Since before?
Yeah, since then.
Yeah, absolutely. They come through in meditation a lot of times. Actually the two spirit guides that I reference that are helping me right now with my intuitive work are lion people. And it's interesting because they shapeshift between being a lion and a lioness and being in their more humanoid, you know, cat human form.
Mm-hmm.
So they are with me all the time. But I've encountered a lot of them during different meditations. Occasionally during readings, one will come through. We've encountered them on investigations. It's interesting because they do, energetically, they feel similar to human spirits, but there's definitely a difference.
Yeah. So what is like this idea of human spirit, or the difference between those two things? Is there, our consciousness is our individual thing, in your opinion, and not we're just like analyzing or expressing the universe's experience, or are we individual entities?
Yes. I think we're both.
Sweet.
No, I really think we're both. I think we are one, but we are living very individual lives.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to say that is really weird, because when I first got into, you know, the spiritual side of things, you know, hearing people talk about, oh, we're all one, I was like, no, we are not. Like, I am not the same as that person who lives down the road from me.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't think it's so hard to explain stuff that we have no language for.
Yep.
You know, I think we all do come from the same source.
Mm-hmm.
But I think whatever we're experiencing right now is very, very unique.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No. Well, what do you make of the these very recent, the last few days, there's been a bunch of like UFO sightings, this idea that the Pentagon is going to release all this, or whatever agencies have to release all this UFO information that they've had in the next 180 days or something like that. And then you had mentioned you work a little bit in ufology.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you make of all that? Do you think, like, what do you think these sightings are? Are they actual beings? Are they things that are coming in and out, kind of like the Bigfoot thing? I've heard that a lot, where they're here all the time and we just happen to see them as they're like going through different dimensions or whatever. What are your thoughts there?
You know, I think some of it is definitely human experiments. I think there's way more of that than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the more recent stuff is probably more interdimensional stuff happening. You know, all the government stuff, you know, I worked so hard to get myself to a place where I was comfortable in talking about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've moved beyond needing the confirmation of the government to tell me that I'm right. I know what I've experienced. I know what I have seen and felt and gone through. And I know a lot of people feel the same. I mean, part of me is very entertained by what the government is putting out, but I don't trust them very much. You know, I think there's some truth, but I know we're not getting the whole truth by any means.
Yeah.
I do believe that there are ETs here working with humans, probably working with the government.
Boom. I do too.
Have you read the book Stranger at the Pentagon?
No, but I've heard about it.
I've heard about that too.
I need to get that book.
Yeah, I highly recommend finding a copy. I don't think it's in regular print. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for a copy, but if you can find one, it's a really fascinating story. And I think one of the things that really hit home for me was the ET, Valiant Thor, kept referring to his boss, to the author, who's I think he was a Catholic priest or something like that. But so Valiant Thor kept calling his boss Jesus. And the author took that very literally. Me not being a person raised very religious, kind of saw it as a way to explain to this man in his own context that Valiant Thor's boss is the creator, not necessarily Jesus, but is the creator. And I do think that we are connected. Our souls are connected to the ET souls.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of think that too, mostly because I'm not sure how I believe about, or how much I believe in like reincarnation and things like that. But there's a lot of legitimate stories behind it. But anyway, one thing that I've heard often is that you could reincarnate as a different entity, right? And so to me, that would be, we have to be connected. It's in some level, we have to possibly be the same thing, just in different forms in different times.
I've had friends tell stories of past life regressions where they're on a planet that is not the Earth.
Oh, fascinating. I would love to experience that. So as far as the relationship of aliens and our government, the reason I was wondering about whether or not you thought they were really from like other planets in our reality or other dimensions is because there's always this talk about, especially now with the uptick in sightings, and always on the conspiracy forums, everybody's always talking about the government using like an alien invasion, like this big scary thing to do whatever they want to do, whether it's make a one world government or create all this control stuff. But do you think that's a possibility of something that could happen? And if it was, like, how are people supposed to react? If it's like, how do we differentiate between whether it's a physical thing in our reality or just something in a dimension that's just kind of there to scare us?
I think the government would have a hard time using an alien invasion to really do much but cause chaos. So if that's their goal, I think that would work. I think if you look at last year, it's really obvious that our world cannot agree on anything. There's not just two parties. There's 8, 10, 12, 20 different schools of thoughts on all the stuff that's going on. So I don't know that you're going to be able to get a mass reaction. You know, and in my gut, I don't think anything like that would happen. I feel like if that was going to happen, it would have already happened. I think we're too far gone into the chaos for anything like that to really be effective.
100%.
I probably agree with you there. Do you feel like an energy shift, and has there been like an increase in positive energy, or do you think we're headed towards something more chaotic initially before it gets better?
I honestly think there's more positivity out there. It's really hard to see. And I think there are forces out there trying to make it hard for us to see. You know, I think we're really being challenged to find our own core, our own values. You know, if you want to find the positivity, all you have to do is look for it. It's there. And once you see it, you'll see more of it, and you'll keep seeing more of it. But if you're focusing on all the negative stuff, if you let that noise overwhelm you, it's just going to be that much harder to get through it.
Yeah.
But I definitely think there's way more positivity than not. I think we're in a good upshift.
Good. I also think it's good that it seems that conversations like these are becoming more acceptable too, which I think will help bring information like this to people that have never heard about it before, and then they can start researching and looking into things. And
And that's one of the reasons why I started working with the paranormal group and doing lectures and things like that. I didn't grow up reading the nonfiction books about ETs and ghosts and that type of thing. I read the fiction books. I'm a fiction girl. That's just what I like. And so for me, I try to put into my books things that will help to open people's minds, so then they will want to look more into it, and they'll seek out the videos and the podcasts and the books, the nonfiction books, and really dive into these things. But a good friend of mine, he has had abduction experiences his entire life, and he has trauma associated with that. And it took me probably a year and a half of knowing him to know that about him. I knew he was quiet. I didn't know why he was quiet until somebody else told me that he had gone through this. And then as I started working more and more with him, we really kind of aligned with, we need to have these conversations. So when things happen to people like what happened to him, he can, people can talk about it instead of living in the trauma and living in the fear and the uncertainty of it all. Because if he had had somebody to talk to about it, his life may have been very different. So now he's advocating for that. And I advocate for that. I stopped being afraid of having these conversations wherever I go, including my day job. I work in aquaculture by day, and everybody in my office knows I do all this weird stuff outside of work. Because I don't see the point in hiding it anymore.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, I get a positive reaction. Almost everybody has some sort of story. They're just waiting for that opening to talk about it.
Yeah.
I've noticed that too. I've noticed when I bring it up to people, the general reaction that I get is usually positive. I haven't really had a negative experience talking about this stuff in a really long time. So that just kind of tells me that people are kind of starting to open up about it, which is good.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah. Because we've been attached to this stuff forever. I mean, ancient people have been using things like this and discussing this since before written record, having this connection with this other dimension or this other reality or these different lives and stuff like that. It's just now people are just so scared to talk about it, or you can't have these, well, at least not now, like you said, it's trending upward, but at least the last 20 years or 30 years that you'd be crazy for thinking that, or you can't have that conversation in public without people not taking you seriously,
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't know if you guys know Peter Robbins. He has a new radio show out that started last Monday. He's very big in the UFO. He's very big in the UFO community. He does a lot of lectures. He's written a ton of books. So he has a radio show that started last Monday, and he was talking about the origin of the fear that the media created around UFOs. Where, all of a sudden newscasters who were taking it very seriously were mocking the people who were saying they saw a flying saucer. Because up until I think maybe the 40s or 50s, it was taken pretty seriously. You would find stories in the newspapers written very seriously about this sort of thing. And then all of a sudden it's only the backwoods hillbillies that, drink too much that see UFOs.
Yep. Well, luckily we have independent media now, which is starting to make a strong rise, and they're not going to be able to keep that stuff quiet for much longer. I mean, everybody has good cameras now. These videos are popping up all over the place.
Yeah. And even some of the mainstream media does seem to actually be taking it a little more seriously now, which is very interesting. I think I saw something on Fox News recently, accidentally. And I was like, oh, they're talking about UFOs. Oh my God, I can't believe this. It was very exciting.
Yeah, and they have to, because otherwise their viewership's going to go down. People are starting to wake up and be like, there might be something else going on besides this narrative that we've been force fed for the last 50 years.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to be afraid of it. I think, there's nothing wrong with being open to other possibilities. To be too focused on just us just seems silly.
Yeah. And we kind of do that too, though, pretty much in any, at least in American culture, for sure. But this idea that anything outside of hard science, this touch and feel thing, everything beyond that is just not serious, can't be taken seriously. It has to be this concrete thing that I can touch and feel. And it's just so weird to me, because that's only a recent thing. We've never, as humans.
And that all stems from fear. Fear is our worst enemy, because it's the scientists who are afraid of losing their grant money or their tenure or whatever else if they say the wrong thing. But any good scientist is going to say, well, we don't know what's going on. Let's find methods to try to figure it out. And we need more scientists to do that. To really say, okay, we don't know, because everything that science has figured out, they started out not knowing, so we need to get there somehow.
Do you think, though, that there's people that are trying to keep that stuff quiet? For instance, like Tesla and all his work. Are there organizations that are trying to cover up stuff like this or keep these scientists from getting mainstream? And why would they be doing that?
It does seem like that's a possibility. But I do feel like the shift is moving away from that. My friend Andy Kitt that I referenced earlier, he's working on a PhD right now in visual psychophysics, because there are very few PhDs in parapsychology. That's really what he wants to do. He wants to find scientific methods of proving all of this stuff, whether it's, figuring out how mediumship works, figuring out what consciousness is, figuring out, what that full-bodied apparition actually is, or the UFO or whatever. He wants to find scientific methods to research that stuff. But he has to do it through a psychology program instead of parapsychology. But he's finding a way, which is cool.
Do you think this is I don't know why I thought about this, but there's this movie that was made a couple of years ago, and it was about this guy that found scientific proof of the afterlife, and then like an untold millions of people across the planet killed themselves. Because,
what was it called? The Discovery, right? Yeah,
The Discovery. Because they wanted to it's great. It's on Netflix. It's actually like a pretty interesting movie. And so millions of people worldwide kill themselves because they want to experience this afterlife thing. Is there ever, like, with this type of exposure or trying to get more people on board with this, if we ever had scientific evidence that there was something beyond this existence, do you think we would run into any issues with something like that? People being like, oh man, this is so hard. This reality. Let me try this other one.
I think that there's always that possibility, but how do we know that's not how they were meant to go? Yeah. How do we know that wasn't their path to be the messenger of that for us? It's so hard to determine when somebody goes, if that was the right way or not. Who are we to say? But I definitely think we need to get away from the fear of death. Like I sound like a broken record. Fear is, something that is holding us back in so much. You think about some of the indigenous cultures, death wasn't a big deal to them. It was, okay, we're moving on to the next phase. Like they just knew, they didn't need scientific proof. They knew that there was more for them to do, just in a different way. And they weren't afraid of that, but we're conditioned to be afraid. And in being so afraid of death, a lot of times we're not living. I know people who are so afraid of everything that something bad will happen as soon as they step out their door that they don't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not doing anybody any good.
Yeah, it's terribly sad.
Valerie, you mentioned you teach Reiki. And
Yes.
I want to know a little more about that because I'm super interested in Reiki. And so for one thing, I want to know exactly what it is. And then also, like, how does that help you connecting with people, deceased people? Like, does that like help you in that aspect? Like, does it connect at all?
Yeah, so the belief is that Reiki is using source energy, so energy from wherever the higher source is, that humans can manipulate it, moving it through the body to help heal another body. So Reiki would be hands-on or hands not quite touching, to move the energy through a body to where it needs to go to help the healing process. You know, I definitely think, you know, for me, I feel so much energy all the time that there's not much difference in sensing an entity and doing Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all energy, it's all feeling, it's all figuring out the message. You know, I'm figuring out a message from, you know, dead Uncle Joe, or I have somebody laying on a table in front of me and I'm trying to figure out the message their body is trying to send them. So yeah,
Gotcha.
I definitely think it's connected. And if you're curious about it, I recommend picking up a book or something and just read through it. You know, my first experience was I read a book about, you know, an introduction to Reiki, and I started trying Reiki on my cat. And I was like, oh, I've been doing this my whole life. It's like, I didn't know that's what that was. You know, so if it's something you're drawn to, you know, it's probably something you'd be good at.
Well, yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
I had a question about this. So with this energy that is around us and that people can kind of, would you say that we can kind of tap into that energy? Are there ways, can people use that for, or draw like bad energy and use it in a negative way? And like for people that are playing around with this stuff and wanting to start connecting with or have this like deeper connection to energy and the possibly deceased people or people in another dimension, how would we stay away from falling into maybe some of those darker energies? Or
I don't think it's the energy that would necessarily be dark. It would be the intention attached to it.
Okay.
If your intention is dark, then it's gonna have dark consequences. You know, intention is hugely powerful, and you know, people don't understand that when they intend to do something bad, that's you're setting the groundwork for that to have a negative impact.
So if that person is just a bad person, then that's kind of what will be projected.
Yeah.
No,
you know, I definitely
really powerful.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm a big believer in what you put out comes back to you threefold. And, you know, I joke around with people that I'm Sicilian and I can curse and I can give you the evil eye, but I'm like, I wouldn't do that because I don't want that coming back at me. I fully believe in that. What you know, if you put out positivity and love and joy, that's what you're going to get back. And that's what I want in my life. I don't want the other stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, before you get out of here, what are you working on now? Like what kind of stuff, are you writing something currently, or are you researching something currently?
I am writing. So I just released the third book in my Tangled Web of Friends series. The first one is called Summer Camp. The second one is The Witches of Fishkill Pond. And the third one is called The Last Hour. They are technically young adult fiction stories, but people of all ages have read them. If you like ghost stories and relationship stories, then you'll probably like these. And I do put a lot of my own experiences into the books. So I'm currently working on the fourth book in the series. So that's a big project for me. And right now I'm looking for research. I'm just looking for places to go, locally, because we're still kind of restricted, and it's winter on top of it. Just to kind of play with energy, feel things out, and kind of start getting back into communicating with what's going on, and really start working with my guides to maybe define things a little bit more than we have so far. I don't want to make assumptions about what's going on. I want to keep digging to find out what's going on. So those are my main focuses, that
Awesome.
and I'm always looking for ways to help other empaths. So that's very important for me.
Sweet. Where can people find you? Like, do you have a website or anything like that? Social media?
The website is a work in progress for probably like 5 or 6 years now. But I am on Facebook, Valerie Lofaso, author and Empathic Medium. You should be able to find me on there. I post a lot of stuff on paranormal stuff, empath stuff, mediumship stuff, weird stuff. So
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it. This was fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Have a great night.
Good night.